Good evening to everybody joining. We're just going to give it another minute or two before we get started for this evening's program. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the 5th of Hebrew Seminary's 2021 Spirituality Series, Jewish Mysticism, Making It Real for Your Life. Hebrew Seminary has created this series of webinars led by our esteemed seminary faculty, which are designed to explore the enduring wisdom of Judaism and Jewish mysticism, and to offer pathways to help us navigate our world and the challenges we face, as well as the good times, both as individuals and collectively. Since our founding in 1992 in Skokie, Illinois, Hebrew Seminary has been an inclusive and egalitarian community, teaching our students to become rabbis and Jewish educators to serve all Jewish communities, including, and importantly, the deaf community. We offer a scholarly education that empowers our students to become leaders and spiritual guides, as well as providing learning opportunities for all communities. We want to give special thanks and recognition and gratitude to our extraordinary founder and president, Rabbi Dr. Douglas Goldhammer. For those of you who are familiar with the seminary, we thank you for your being part of our community. And for those of you who are new to Hebrew Seminary, we're very grateful that you're here, and for the virtual opportunities to reach audiences beyond the walls of the seminary, especially during this past year plus. I'm Nancy Rothstein. I'm a member of the board of Hebrew Seminary, and I will be moderating this evening's 5th of our series. And it is, and I shall dwell within them, assessing the inner holy spark with Reb Rahmiel Hayyim Drizin. Before I introduce Reb, a few Zoom guidelines to enrich your experience this evening. The chat room you see at the bottom of your screen is open for your comments. Please put your questions, which we'll get to at the end, for Reb in the Q&A feature, also at the bottom of your screen. We'll be getting to those after Reb Rahmiel's fascinating presentation. And to ensure you can all hear him, your mics are muted. And I want to introduce Kathy Silvern, our ASL interpreter, who will be signing this evening, and thank you, Kathy. For those following Kathy, feel free to use the gallery view rather than the speaker view, which you can find in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. In addition, you may choose to pin Kathy's video, that is to enlarge it, by clicking on the 3 dots on the top right corner of her image and select Pin Video. Note that you can also do this on the speaker's video as well. And I want to thank Becky Adelberg, Hebrew Seminary's Marketing and Development Director, who will be sharing Reb's visual resources. So thank you, Becky. And now, let me introduce our inspiring speaker. Reb Rahmiel was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and moved to Chicago to attend Northwestern University Law School. He's a devoted student of many of the teachings of Kabbalah in English, in Israel, and in the US. He is an assistant public defender who lives in Oak Park with his family, and he teaches at Hebrew Seminary, for which we're very, very grateful. Much of his work is available online at KabbalahOnline.org. Now, as I said, he'll be addressing "And I Shall Dwell Within Them," assessing the inner holy spark. By exploring the Shechinah, which is Hebrew for the feminine indwelling presence of God, Reb Rahmiel will help us open paths to access her place in our hearts and in our souls. If you've had the privilege of attending any of his classes, you know that he is a gifted and engaging teacher. And with that, welcome, Reb Rahmiel.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for that wonderful introduction. I was blessed 10 years ago to be asked by Rav Goldhammer to come and teach a class in Zohar here. And it's been my honor to be teaching pretty regularly every term since then. I was asked by our chairman, Tom Giller, to be able to come and speak about a topic, and I chose something that was near and dear to me, and something which I think we cannot spend too much time contemplating. The first class that I taught back in 2011 in the winter term to such noted teachers and students and graduates of the seminary as Rob Drury. I believe Allison was there too, as well as Marcy. It was a wonderful class. The first class was on Shechinah and the various Zohar sections that dealt with how we connect to the Spirit of God amongst us. For this class, though, we have to do an initial step, and that is to take off our thinking caps. Take off our thinking caps and put on a spiritual presence. Because while there are many intellectual books about Kabbalah, the way that we can learn about Kabbalah is through spiritual, through connecting to the inner spirit, to the spark of God within us. Kabbalah means to receive. And what do we receive? We receive the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, which is present within us at all times. The verse that came into mind about this class was a verse from the Parsha Terumah, which is discussing the building of the Mishkan, the sanctuary. And in this famous phrase it says in Exodus 25:8, Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, and they shall make me a Mishkan, a sanctuary, and I will dwell in their midst. Now Rashi, 1,000 years ago, our most famous Torah commentator, noticed a perplexing thing. The verse should say, V'shakanti b'tocham, and I shall dwell amongst them. But it should say, b'tocho, I should dwell within it, in the sanctuary. But instead it says, b'tocham. What this means is God is telling us that if we can build a Mishkan sanctuary inside us, then God will dwell inside us. Inside us, and not in just a place. The word to dwell in Hebrew is b'shakanti, and I will dwell, which has the root shakan, which means neighbor or to dwell. It has the same root as the Hebrew word Shechinah, meaning the feminine indwelling presence of God. The place where God dwells is in the Mishkan, of which in this week's Torah portion we're reading about the menorah, the candelabrum that was lit, which has the Ner Tamid, the eternal light. The Ner Tamid is not someplace just in the synagogue. It is within each and every one of us. For the purpose of creation was for God to have a dwelling place here below. We built a Mishkan where the Shechinah dwelled, and that was a parable for having God dwell within us. So how do we access the Shechinah, the female indwelling presence of God within us? As I said, we need to take off our thinking caps. This is not an intellectual exercise, but a spiritual voyage. And our job is to be spiritual seekers, constantly trying to find ways to open up the light of God, the luminous love light of the eternal within and without. So I invite you to join me in this voyage today. In the remaining 50 minutes we have, I'd like to reserve some time for questions. But it's important to connect, to just let go of the cares and the woes and the worries of the day. take a deep breath through your nose and let it out through your mouth. A deep cleansing breath through your nose and out through your mouth. One of the most important times to connect to God is before we go to sleep, because in that part we surrender our soul to God. And in the Ashkenazi tradition, there is a song, an angel song. Last month, Rabbi Chen taught about angels amongst us. This is a famous song with a melody by Rabbi Shlomo Karbach of blessed memory, which he takes the word of this evening prayer, a bedtime shmer prayer, and gives it a wonderful melody. The melody is to surround yourself with angels and to make sure that the Shechinah rests upon our head, like the light on a menorah, a candelabrum. So I'm going to first play the melody, and I want you to just imagine yourself as a menorah, a candelabrum, and imagine that we stand in the middle branch, and imagine a warm light on your head as we hear the melody and as I sing the words. Of me, Uriel, behind me, Raphael, and above my head, Shechinah Del, and above my head, Shechinah Del. So, why can't we see God's presence in this world? Why can't we see Shechinah? Our sages said that since the destruction of the temple, she is in exile, which means that even though the western wall of the Holy Temple, in the holy city of Jerusalem, in the Holy Land of Israel, we're told that there's special spiritual import there. But if the Shekhinah is in exile, she's not dwelling there. She's dwelling with us wherever we are. So our job is to figure a way how to connect to this divine presence. Becky, could you please be so kind to put up the Olam, Shana, and Nefesh PDF? So, we see three words here. The top word is Olam. Olam means world The second word is Shana, and Shana means year. And the bottom word is Nefesh, and Nefesh means soul. Olam, world or place. God's place in this world is, in the Olam, is Ne'elam, hidden. Because if we look outside, we see beautiful things, but we don't necessarily see God. We can see purple mountains, majesty. We can see the fruited plain, but we really can't see God explicitly, because God is Ne'elam, in the Olam, hidden in the world. Shana, time. We all know that on Shabbat and on new moons and on holidays, we feel something more of God's presence in our prayers, in our rituals, in our meals, in our Torah readings, but yet God is hidden in time. And finally, Nefesh. That's the soul level. We all have had very special spiritual things that have happened to us in our life, but they're fleeting. They're here today, gone tomorrow. God is hidden in exile within our soul, and our job is to try to recognize God both in the world, in places, wherever we are, in Shana, in time, and in Nefesh, in soul. Thank you. Can you remove the video? Thank you. These are the basic dimensions in which we exist and interact with our Shechinah. So who or what is Shechinah, the feminine indwelling presence? We go to nature. Nature is a very good place to connect with Shechinah because she stands for Mother Nature, Mother Earth. We see her written in the mystical writings as the lily, as the rose, as the well of water, which was in the honor of Miriam, Moses' sister, that followed us around the desert and gave us water so that we would not die. Shechinah is depicted as a female deer, a doe, or a hind. But just as nature has a wonderful giving side, there are other things we must think about. Becky, please put on the Shechinah as nature PDF. So, just as we can imagine the most wonderful scene in the world is watching a mother and her child. I don't know if we're going to get I'm not seeing it on my screen. Shechinah's nature.
Quite vivid, so maybe.
Oh, it is? Okay, I'm not seeing it on my screen. Okay.
No, it's not actually.
So, I'm not seeing it on my screen here.
You want to just give us
yes. So what would be seeing a mother bear playing with her baby cubs, playing in the water, fishing, all these wonderful things. But as we know, if we are unfortunate to come close to that mother bear, all of a sudden we are going to have one of the most terrible scenes in our life, because the mother bear will defend with all of the tenacity that it can. We were, I was in Yellowstone about 2 or 3 years ago. We have to carry a huge container of bear spray to prevent against that. So just as nature is nurturing, there's also a very strong, powerful element of it. For example, we all need water. Water is our sustenance. 70% of our body, 70% of the world is water. But if you just think about Hurricane Katrina, that too much water can be terrible, as was the Great Flood, when the same water that was used to sustain us could destroy us. We may not remember, but about 8 weeks ago when we read the Haggadah for Passover, the words Gilui Shechinah were mentioned in particular. Gilui Shechinah means the revelation of Shechinah, or God's indwelling presence. And when is it mentioned? It's mentioned about the time of the plagues. We say with a great terror, and the Haggadah says that is Gilui Shechinah, the revelation of God's indwelling presence. How could it be that the plagues can be involved with God's dwelling presence? Exactly. God is always present. The plagues were used not only to teach the Jews about God's presence, but also to punish. And so so if you can see here, we see a beautiful scene here of a bear playing with the cubs. Beautiful. But let not that bear see you, or else you'll see the bottom picture, and we never want to be in that place when we see that. We right now are blessed, for those who've been vaccinated, hopefully we are getting, to be, God willing, at the end of a pandemic. So why are we getting this plague? Why did we get COVID-19? We don't know that. But when God brings a plague, that is when Shechinah, God's presence, is involved. Because if we think that God is not involved with all the intimate details of the world, we are making a hefsek, or distinction, between God and the world, and God's presence is with us directly. It is interesting to use a Kabbalistic analysis of the word COVID-19. There's a word in Hebrew called kavod. Kavod means glory. It's the glory of the Shechinah. So the COVID part sounds like kavod, God's glory being revealed. And 19, incredibly, is the numerical total of the word Chava, or Eve, our first mother, who was the embodiment of Shechinah, as were all the matriarchs. Can we see the video, please?
You were so fine on the vine.
Well, there's a lot you don't know.
I'll bet you don't know about this.
Oh, come on. That's a stick of my sweet, creamy butter.
That's chiffon stick margarine.
Chiffon stick margarine?
Right, chiffon fooled you.
It's not nice to fool Mother Nature.
If you think it's butter, but it's not. It's chiffon.
Now, I'm not sure the age of those who are on this, watching this, but growing up in the 60s and 70s, a lot of my life was determined by Madison Avenue commercials. There's an important meaning to this, to fool Mother Nature or to mess with Mother Nature. We can see this with climate change and what's happening in places all over the world. And perhaps, just perhaps, the COVID-19 is I think it should be a wake-up call that we need to think about how we react and how we relate to nature, and to make some substantive changes. How else is Shechinah revealed? Shechinah is revealed, according to our tradition, in a person, in the female. The woman of valor, chapter 31, from verse 10 to 32 of the book of Proverbs, is the Eshet Chayil. And this This poem, this proverb, is read on Friday nights to salute the woman of the house, who is representative upon Shechinah. See, we men, we can do what we want, but we do not have as intimate a connection to the Shechinah as a woman. Every woman has Shechinah within and without on an intensive dimension. All of the matriarchs, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel and Leah, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel and Leah, as well as all of the heroines, whether it be Esther or Deborah in the Torah, they all contained a spark of Shechinah. And we know that they all represented something different. Each of the personalities was a little different, but profound. Profound in being at the right place at the right time. The right place, the olam, the right time, the shana we talked about, and their nefesh soul was connected. We read through the Song of Songs and we read about the bride and the girlfriend, and we read about the wife. On Friday nights we sing L'cha Dodi L'krat Kala, Pnei Shabbat N'Kabbalah. We welcome the bride, the Sabbath bride, on Friday night. Mother, daughter, sister, wife, these are all faces of Shechinah. Shechinah has many different faces within the feminine world and within nature. Shechinah also has a part of a place, the makom. Whether it's the gate of the city, the door of the tent that Abraham was sitting, speaking with God when he saw the three travelers, our temple or synagogue, which is a mishkan ma'at, a small mishkan, is also a place where Shechinah dwells. The moon, which constantly changes in flux, and whose dimension affects the women on this world who have a monthly cycle, a menses related to month. The Holy Land of Israel is related to Shechinah, as is Jerusalem, as is the mountain, the Temple Mount. Shechinah is present in colors, whether it's the blue of the sea, the blue of the sky of heaven, the techelet blue strings that we wear on our ritual strands, tzitzit, on our talit katan, small talit, as well as talit gadol, that surrounds us, like an eagle surrounding her nestlings, like a Shechinah surrounding us, like a sukkah in which we sing Ufros Aleinu Sukkat Shlomecha, spread amongst us your sukkah of peace. Those are all places of Shechinah. Colors. Blue, brown is earth. Actually, according to our tradition, the earth, which is Adamah, is red, Adon. Red is a color which indicates blood. It's a color which is given to the feminine who see blood monthly, and whose blood in their body, we're told, turns white into milk, which is fed to an infant. Blue, brown, and red are all colors that are attributed to Shechinah, as is green. When we go up and we look at the earth and we see green and blues, the earth is Shechinah. It's the place where God's presence dwells below. Those are all colors related. Time, Shana. We connect to Shechinah in time. Time itself is feminine. Of course, every woman knows they have an internal clock within them, within and without, which is why, according to traditional Judaism, women are exempt from positive time-bound commandments. They are exempt because they do all their work by living in the world. They don't need a reminder to fill in the morning by a certain time, or to study Torah by a certain time, or to pray at certain times. They are well beyond what measly men like myself have to do to try to master time. In terms of time, Shabbat is a time which takes all of the faces of God and brings it to one. The Friday night is the most feminine of Shabbat. It is called the Field of Holy Apples, or in Aramaic, the Hakal Tapukin Kadishim. Imagine being in a field of fragrant apples, smelling them, and feeling the connection with. That is Friday night on the Sabbath. Every new moon is a special holiday. For those who can go back 20 years and read the famous best-selling novel, The Red Tent by Anita Diamond. The Red Tent was a place where women would go on the first of the month. Why? Because they were living in such close communities that their cycles worked out, and on the first night of the month, they would go to a special tent to be by themselves. It was the Red Tent, the place of bleeding, and their cycles were all in sync. As I've been told by friends of mine who had several college roommates, that the cycles got united at a certain time. That's the new moon. And just as the moon ebbs and flows, so does our connection with God in our mind, but the connection is always there. Even though there is no light on the new moon, we know that Shechinah is amongst us. Holidays. Every holiday is feminine. It stands for our Divine Mother. Ele Moedei Adonai. The initial letters of those words, Aleph, Men, and Yud, stand for Imi, my mother. Every holiday is an opportunity for us to connect to sacred time and to the sacred Shechinah. We just had the holiday of Shavuot, which means weeks. The holiday itself is called time. And we're told in that time, for those 7 weeks, we are supposed to be working ourselves, similar to the way a woman who is going through maybe a 7-day cycle is contemplating what's going on in their lives. Those 7 weeks take us from Passover to Shavuot, where we receive the Torah on Mount Sinai, a place where God's presence rested. And finally, the level of soul. God took a pile of Adamah, the red earth, and blew it into it the Nefesh Kochai, the soul of life. In that, God's DNA was placed within us. His Shekhinah was placed in every single human, blown into that, and that rests us right now. Just if we took, for example, pottery from an ancient community, we could probably find the DNA of the pottery maker, the one who threw the clay. Similarly, God's DNA, his Shekhinah, is within all of us. In Hebrew, we call this a chelek elokah mima'al mamash. Truly, a portion, a section, a piece, an allotment of God from above rests in all of us. We Jews who stood at Sinai 3,333 years ago have a special role, because at that time we heard the letter Aleph of the word Anochi, I, of the first commandment, I am Hashem your God. We all heard that. That was so powerful that our souls left us and we were resouled with the sacred mission of showing that light of Aleph, of the word Or, to the rest of the world. We're not better than everyone else, but we do have a very special job to keep showing that light, the light of Shechinah, the light of the Ner Tamid, the eternal light, the light of the menorah, to show to the world. Where is Shechinah? The Kotzker Rebbe, a very famous Hasidic teacher, his students asked, Rebbe, where is the dwelling place of God? Where is Shechinah? His famous answer is, the dwelling place of Shechinah is wherever you let Shechinah in. For if we are too full of ourselves, there's no room for God. There's no room for God to dwell within us. How do we find Shechinah? We need to open ourselves up to the luminous love light of the One. Meditating, contemplating, thinking about where you are holding in place, in time, and in soul. And they shall make me a sanctuary, Vasuli Mikdash, Vishakanti Bitocham, and I will dwell in their midst. How do we do this? There are famous Kabbalistic meditations that, while easy to teach, require more beyond what we can do in the short time we have left. But I direct your attention for further research to look at Psalm 16:8. Psalm 16:8, where King David says, Shaviti Hashem Lenegdi Tamid, I place God before me always. Who is a saint? Who is a righteous person? We know who that is. That is someone who is thinking about God, thinking about doing good all the time. When they do so, they place God, they place the Shechinah before them always. And even though our religious practices and our rituals and our commandments open a path, for some holy people, they don't need that. They just act as if the Shechinah is before them always. They do the right thing. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. Becky, can we please have the Havaya in human form PDF? Now, I know Rav Goldhammer teaches a lot of meditations, and I've been blessed to have learned with him and read his books. What I'm putting on now are the Hebrew letters Yud and He and Vav and He in human form. So, thank you. So what we see here are the four letters of God's name, Yud and He and Vav and He, arranged in the form of a human. Why, you may ask? Because we were all created B'Tselem Elohim. We were all created in the image, in the form of God. The image at the left shows white fire upon black fire. The image on the right shows black fire upon white fire. This is a very important meditation. Our head is like the letter Yud, bringing down, it's like the light on the top of a candle. The letter He, which is the second letter, going down from top to bottom, that would stand for our shoulders and our arms, those things that are bringing us to connection, that we use to take the thoughts of our mind into action. The letter Vav is a vertical line down. It's the third letter going from top to bottom. That is our trunk, that is bringing down the energy from above to below. And finally, there's the letter He as our hips and our legs, in which we use to bring holy action into the world. Yud and He and Vav and He. These letters can be found in any Hebrew prayer, in the Torah. If you put down looking at Hashem, Hashem, which means the name of God, in Google you will find, if you look into videos or images, you'll find this picture. This is placed before us always. And we're actually told that it's an important meditation to keep thinking about God. Because if we're thinking about God, we're doing the right thing all the time. But the meditation gets a little bit more connected when we want to explicitly think about Shechinah. Shechinah is the name of God that exists in this world. In this world, this is where the kingdom of God is, where God is the Melech, or the king. Could we please have the Adonai PDF, please? So, there's a weird sort of thing that goes on in our Hebrew tradition. We do not pronounce the name of God as it was written on that previous form. We pronounce it by another name. That name is spelled Aleph, Daled, Nun, and Yud, and we're going to get the PDF on there in a second. That name literally means my Lord or my Master. God rules in this world. God is the ruling power. It's the Ruach HaOlam. The name is spelled from left to right, Aleph, Daled, Nun, and Yud. The thing about this name is it kind of hints to the fact of the laws of how this works, because these letters could be rearranged to form the word Dina, Dina meaning the law. This world has very strict physical laws. If I stepped outside of my outdoor balcony and think I can fly, I will be sorely mistaken in a very short time, because gravity will pull me down very quickly. Laws in this world, chemical laws, biological laws, physical laws, they work pretty strictly. They're the dina of the law, the din. The name Adonai, and I'm breaking it up because it's a holy name, relates to the way God acts in our earth plane. It's a law of laws, of natural laws. That is the way we pronounce God's name. God's presence is concealed, but we can reveal God through chemistry, through biology and physics. Because it just can't be by mere evolution or chance that we could have such a perfect body that strives for healing, or an earth that seems to fix itself. We may look at a forest fire as being a terrible thing, but you know what? There have been forest fires for years in which the burnt wood becomes fertilizer for new growth. Similarly, if we go to the earth, and if we looked in the beautiful earth, my garden outside, we would find a tremendous amount of decomposed leaves, bugs, lots of things, plants, things that died come back and give us fertilization. The manure of animals has tremendous value for just that purpose. Things that are died get reborn again through new growth. This is the name Adonai that we use to pronounce the name Yud and He and Vav and He. It is a name that is concealed within the Yud and the He and the Vav and the He, not revealed. We have to do a mental exercise when we see God's name of Yud and He and Vav and He by saying this name. And that is to show you that while Shechinah is concealed, we can reveal it by referring to this name, Adonai, whenever we see God's name of Yud and He and Vav and He. And if we could please have the slide of Shechinah PDF, please. Shechinah is hidden within us. It's our job to find her, to connect to her, to open up a place in our heart for God to dwell amongst us. What we're going to show you here is a way to do that. Shechinah, that is the word. That is the divine feminine, hidden, concealed. We really get glimpses, but never a complete view. And what you'll see in the middle of the screen is a unification of God's name of Yud and He and Vav and He, interspersed with the letters of Adonai, Aleph, Dalet, Nun, and Yud. When I first met with Nancy, she proudly showed this from a class she had from Rav Goldheimer. This is a basic meditation to let us know that Shechinah is always present within God and is always present with us. Yud and He and Vav and He is the name of God that we need to place before us. And we call upon her Aleph, Daled, Nun, and Yud. By unifying both, we have both the concealed and the revealed. There will come a time, God willing soon, that we will see more of God's presence. We saw God's presence with COVID. We see God's presence trying to tell us a message. We don't understand it with what's going on in Israel. We saw God's presence with what happened on January 6th in Washington, as well as on Election Day in November. Of course, if we think that God has nothing to do with this earth, then we are making a place where God does not exist, and God and His Shechinah are always present. So where do we find Shechinah? We look inside. We look for the good. We look for God. And we build a mishkan, the root of Shechinah, a sanctuary, by doing holy and good things. And there is where God has promised that God will dwell. I bless you to open yourself to the luminous love light of the One and to find Shechinah within and without. And shall we have some questions, please?
Yes, we shall. We shall have some questions. That was really, really beautiful, and your visuals were so helpful. That prayer of making yourself in the image, or that we are in the image, that's maybe one of the most profound things that I've ever learned. I learned it from Rabbi Douglas and Rabbi Oak, but I've never been the same. I actually do that every morning and throughout the day. When I walk in my house and I touch on the door, I make myself, because it reminds me literally to be in that fragrance. Thank you for that.
So Nancy, I want to tell you that the name mezuzah, that has the same numerical significance of Aleph, Daled, and Nun, and Yud, the name Adonai. She stands there to protect our doors, because she is the doorway to holiness. And the mezuzah is the place where Shechinah dwells, because her name, Mem Zayin Zayin, Mem Zayin Vav Zayin He, is equal to 65, or the name of Adonai.
It is so extraordinarily written for us to learn, and you have so illuminated. But let me get to these questions. So someone had written before this, hey, I thought God was neither male or female. What's this with the female face of God?
Beautiful. Guess what? We're created in God's image. So God has both, it says male and female God created. So God is everything in terms of humans. And according to the Kabbalah, we actually refer to God as Abba, Father, Ima, Mother, Ben, Son, Bat, Daughter. there's great-grandfather, there's grandfather, grandmother, brother, sister, son, daughter, child. Okay, all these, just like we see in the world, there are also faces of God that are related to that. So, yes, God is not male or female, but there are masculine and feminine energies within God. Shechinah is the place where God dwells on our earth plane. And it's the most feminine because it receives energy from above in the way that rain falls into the earth. So, yeah, there is no, God is, for our ear, we're silly humans, okay? We need to get something to grab onto. So the Kabbalah explains that there's all these different energies and explicitly deals with these energies to bring home the fact that God is all those, and much, much more.
Well, someone else asked, is Hashem hiding in plain view?
Beautiful question. So I said that the word olam means world. Our sages say that God is ne'elam, the same root, hidden. Sages would talk about kel mistater, the hidden God, the concealed God. Because just when we think we know God, we know there's just so much more. And they say a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. A little knowledge is a wonderful thing, except if you just rely on that. Every day we need to strive more. So God is, in terms of the Song of Songs, just hiding behind the lattices, watching us, waiting for us. Kind of like your father playing hide-go-seek with us. Peeks out, hello, and then disappears. And as a child you could be feared, but we get the peek. And sometimes we get the peek like if we witness a birth of a child. Ooh. Or if we're standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon. Or if we're comforting a mourner. Or if we're walking someone across the street. Or if we're giving charity for charity. God does that. God buries the dead. God takes care of the sick. God gives charity. When we act that, we are acting godly. And that's how God gets revealed. So God is hidden. All we have to do is try to open up our eyes, not directly, but look at God in the periphery, and we will be able to see God.
That's such the juxtaposition of this next question is, if God's within us all, how come we can't see God? But just like we may not be able to hear with our ears and we hear through happy timing, maybe we don't have to physically see God. We see God in our hearts and in our essence.
So I kind of think that, to explain love, what love is, I think you have to get spiritual. Because it is a feeling, but those who know that feeling know it's something more. And we can actually, there's something, similarly, as we love somebody, God's love for us is never ending. Ahavat olam. Everlasting, continuous giving of love. So, how do we search for God? We look at things like love. You know how you feel when you, in love, the word is ahava. There's a 2-letter root for ahava. It's called hav, to give. We show our love by giving, just like God is always giving us life, giving us sustenance, giving us rain, giving us sun. We show our love to others by giving. When you fall in love with someone, you want to give, give, give. With a child, you want to give, give, give. To your parents who are elderly, you want to give, give, give. The greatest gift is the power to give. It's the power to love. That's when we are holy. That's when we see God.
One last question. There's many spellings of Shechinah, and believe me, I've been known to Google it to say, oh my God, I can't remember. Is there a C? Is there not a C? Do you have anything to say about the spelling?
So it's a question about how you can do the letter Kaf. The letter Kaf that doesn't have a Dagesh. You know, the different traditions. Some make it sound like a letter chet, like a Shechinah. Some it's like a Shechinah, which would be like Shekhina. There are different ways to pronounce a kaf, which doesn't, which has the shva on it and doesn't have any dagesh. They're all correct. The most important thing is to think about that Shechinah is where God Shachan dwells, like in the Mishkan. We sing a song, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Whenever I say Mishkenotecha, I'm thinking Mishchinatecha, where Shechinah dwells. And we know how we feel when we're in shul, particularly at a Rab Galtamer service, which he makes explicitly Kabbalistic, with meditations, breathing, intentions. That's God is dwelling there, but God is also dwelling in our Mishkan Ma'at, in our home. Shechinah, different spellings in English, one spelling in Hebrew. Okay, one spelling in Hebrew.
That's something else. We're trying to find a million ways. Is there anything, we have a closing to come, but is there any last comment or illumination you'd like to say?
So, summertime and the living is easy. Fish are jumping and the cotton is high. A very good exercise would be to appreciate just the bounty that God has given us. Whether it's the colorful tomatoes, or the blueberries, or the fresh corn, or be able to walk outside without having a winter jacket. Those are all ways that we can feel God, whether it's the warm sun on our face, the smell of a morning. Those are ways we can experience. It's nature. It's God in nature. Mother Nature. That's a way that we can connect with God. So as we go through the summer now and it's beautiful days outside, try to experience the lushness and, if I may suggest, to say a blessing on the bounty, the food that we get, the special foods that we get, and to recognize just the kind of work that went into them from people, laborers, hopefully they were getting paid a decent wage, all the people who brought it through trucking, through packaging. They were all, in a sense, working to bring this to you. We should be thankful to them and thank God for them, and hopefully that we can have a system that can bring food and fruit to us. If you grow yourself, we've got a garden outside here. That's an excellent way to try to imagine that just as you're planting a seed, God also plants a seed. Just as you water it and nourish it, God also waters, in a sense, and nourishes you.
Well, that is a beautiful God. So beautiful, so graciously, and so holy. And thank you for that, an opportunity to get out of our heads, for our hearts and souls. And thank you so much. We really do. On behalf of the seminary, thank you so much. So, with that, we are very grateful, as I said to you, Reb Rahmiel, for illuminating the essence. I think we're still going and you can hear me. For illuminating the essence of Shechinah. You've given us a deeper understanding of where to find her in space, time, and our souls. Kathy, we're very grateful to you for your beautiful signing, and to you, Becky, for the visuals. All events are recorded and are made available for future viewing. We encourage you to share these recordings with your family and friends and colleagues. A few announcements about our summer offerings from Hebrew Seminary. The Spirituality series will have a summer version. Our first will be on Tuesday, June 22nd at 7 p.m. with Rabbi Dr. Douglas Goldhammer, who will discuss vibrations, communicating with the angels, building upon Rabbi Sherry Chen's wonderful event for us last month on angels. And we'll be sending more information about that. On August 3rd, also, we'll have Hebrew Seminary graduate Rabbi Tirza Israel speaking. And in addition, and this is wonderful, it should be in the chat, we have a series of summer courses that you can partake in. So go to HebrewSeminary.org, and right on the homepage, you'll see them listed. And from there, you can go to find out more about each course and register. And of course, we are on a quest, not only a spiritual quest, but a quest to raise awareness about our school and its wealth of offerings, both for rabbinic students, and we would love more rabbinic students, and the community at large. If you haven't already, again, please visit HebrewSeminary.org to learn more about us and to explore seminary course offerings, etc. We do welcome your support. It really helps us survive and thrive. And again, to you, all of you, for joining us today and this evening, for supporting Hebrew Seminary. We're dedicated to do all that we can to inspire and prepare people to connect to God, so that each of our lives are lived with faith, joy, and actions to create a better world. So thank you for being with us this evening. And thank you again, Reb Rahmiel. You were just wonderful. A pleasure to be with you. And we'd all like to have you play your guitar and sing that gorgeous song, Calling in the Archangels, every night. I'd like a recording of it so I could just melt into slumber. So thank you, everybody.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you again in June.
Bye-bye.
Bye.